Today we're going to be joined by Mark Diaz and Prabhmar Mutali from the team, along with Suprat Singh. They will be presenting the technical aspects of the benefit cost analysis for you, led primarily by Prab. Next screen, please. So agenda real quick, you can see it here. We're going to go through these 5 parts and try to get you through as quickly to the meat and potatoes as we can. I will be covering the first section. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. All right, so yes, it's a little confusing, but confusing in sense that we have a lot of money available, so that's a good thing. But 4480 is the COVID HMGP. That is a $315 million total federal share. IDA is 43 million, and FRED is 4.3 million. The eligibility for COVID and IDA are very similar. For local governments, the certain private not-for-profits, the projects are the same categories for all 3. The only difference really between 4480, which is COVID, and the IDA is there is a priority given to declared counties for IDA for submitting under the IDA HMGP. Whereas COVID, since it affects the whole state, there is no geographical preference. The FRED HMGP, which is 4.3 million, is reserved for applicants only in the FRED designated county, since that pool of funding is so small. So if you are in a FRED declared county, which you can see those here, and we'll email this slide deck out to you after the webinar, but those are the counties that are the FRED counties. So what type of activities can you do? Again, pretty similar, with the exception that under FRED, there is no planning set aside, again, because that amount is so small, and because there's plenty of planning money available under the other 2. There's no planning under FRED, but other than that, the programs are the same in the eligible projects. The cost share, now again, we have to break it up the way that we do here to show that the COVID is still currently showing as 75% federal, 25% local, whereas the other 2 are at 90-10. Rest assured, the 90-10 paperwork on the COVID money, is in the works. It's a formal agreement that occurs between state and FEMA. It's basically a contract, so as you can imagine, that doesn't always go quickly, but all indications are that 90-10 is going to be approved very shortly on COVID. And to make it convenient to everybody, the deadline for all of the grants is now the same date, June 1st. There are 2 different email addresses that they have to go to, again, just because of the procurement, the way it was set up. But all of the applications are now due June 1st and by close of business. Next slide, please. So here are the key dates and deadlines. Again, nice and easy. It's all June 1st, but there's just a couple of different differences in the way they have to apply. So for 4615, which is IDA, and 4625, which is FRED, those get emailed to the hazard mitigation email box. You can see that hazard mitigation at dishes.ny.gov, and 4480 gets emailed to the HMGP 4480. Now, you don't have to do 3 different applications. We encourage everyone to apply for everything, except obviously limited to the FRED counties for the FRED disaster. But for the other 2 specifically, all you need to do is email that application to the 2 different email addresses, indicating that you're applying for those grants, and that takes care of the procurement side. Same thing applies to FRED. You just indicate that you're applying for the FRED grants. Next slide, please. So by the numbers, this is the IDA declaration, which is, again, there you can see there roughly 40 million for projects, 2 million for planning. Again, the priorities given for the counties that were declared under IDA, but that is just a preference. It's not mandatory. So we expect, again, between the 2 big disasters, IDA and COVID, There's a lot of money to go around. We encourage you to apply to both because it gives you and us the most flexibility to use all those funds. Next slide, please. This is the COVID declaration. Again, that's the other email address that you need to submit to. But this is 293 million available projects, 22 million for planning. Same priorities: vulnerable populations, address climate change, mitigate risk to repetitive loss structures and critical infrastructure. No geographical preference. There is a large set aside for planning and planning related activities, as you can see. So again, that is the largest of the three, due June 1st to that email address. Next slide, please. And finally, our FRED deck, which again is the smallest of the three, available only for those applicants located within those counties, to the hazard mitigation email address by June 1st. And again, all this will be, we're going to send the slide deck out. You'll have all this with the links to help you out. But again, June 1st to that email address for the FRED counties. Next slide, please. And just for your reference, this is what triggers the HMGP. So Section 404 of the Stafford Act. After a disaster, President can set aside up to 15% of the anticipated disaster damage amount for hazard mitigation. In this case, they set aside 4%. But if you're ever interested, that's where it comes from. But most importantly, at the bottom, you have the link to our to the FEMA guidance. That's what the Bible, as we refer to it, the HMA 2015 is what is the governing policy for this grant. Next slide, please. All right. Well, with that, I am going to turn it over to Prabnor Mutani, I believe, to take it from here. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. We'll be going over part 2, understanding the benefit cost analysis, also known as the BCA. Next slide, please. Understanding the benefit cost analysis. A benefit cost analysis is the process of weighing the benefits of a particular action against its cost. The purpose of a BCA is to determine the cost effectiveness of a project. A benefit cost ratio, also known as a BCR, is equivalent to its total project benefits divided by its total project cost. If the benefits outweigh the costs, the BCR will be greater than 1. That means the project is deemed cost effective in FEMA's eyes. Next slide, please. The BCA compares the conditions before and after the mitigation activity is implemented. This tool is utilized to calculate risk reduction in terms of losses avoided. Risk is the severity of the event and its likelihood. Losses are calculated based on its size, recurrence interval, of frequency of the event, and they are determined based on historical damages / costs, calculations from engineering analysis, as well as estimated losses. Next slide, please. Questions to ask before starting a benefit cost analysis. What is the cost of the project? In addition to that, how much will it cost to upkeep and maintain this project to its standard level of effectiveness? What natural hazards is your project addressing? Is it riverine flooding? Is it coastal flooding? Is it hurricane winds, wildfires? And how often does this hazard occur? What damages is this community experiencing due to this hazard? And how much damage can be prevented by implementing this project? Next slide, please. Determining frequency. Although we cannot predict when hazards will occur, we can estimate how likely they are based on historical events, hazard data, or specific hazard analysis, such as a hydrologic and hydraulic study, also known as an H&H. The frequency of a hazard occurring can be represented through a recurrence interval, and an example would be the recurrence interval of a 100-year flood is 100 years. Probability of it occurring in any 1 year would be 1 out of 100, also 1/100th of a decimal point. And for the annual probability, you would just take that decimal point, multiply it by 100%. Therefore, the recurrence interval or the annual probability of a 100-year flood is 1%. Next slide, please. What benefits can be avoided by implementing this mitigation project? Benefits can be shown as future avoided costs or losses, and depending on the hazard, benefits can include loss of service slash function, physical damages, avoided injury slash loss of life, emergency management costs, ecosystem services benefits, and displacement costs. Next slide, please. Determining damages loss of function. Loss of function slash service, that's interruption to critical services, roads, bridges, and utilities specifically caused by a natural hazard event. Benefits can then be quantified by the value of the function and the length of the interruption. And as you can see in that image below, it is a hospital that was flooded. We have firefighters working, we have volunteers. That can all be computed into benefits to show the loss of function and the loss of service that and damages that the hospital had incurred or cost, I should say. Next slide, please. Critical facilities. Benefits are calculated based on mitigating loss of service by allowing police stations, fire stations, hospitals, and other facilities to stay open or reduce their downtime. Now, the benefit cost analysis toolkit or calculator, it auto calculates the value of service per day for critical facilities based on the inputs for the following questions. What is the population served by the facility? What is the distance to the closest alternative facility? And then for other critical facilities that do not fit the hospital, police station, or fire station, this could be examples such as like a Department of Public Works. For those facilities, an annual operating budget and the duration of time that service was lost is required in order to quantify benefits. Next slide, please. Road/bridges. For those, benefits can be calculated depending on increased time and distance of detours when the road/bridge is either closed or lost completely. For utilities, benefits can be calculated based on the FEMA value of service. That's the dollar value per person per day multiplied by the total number of customers served and duration of service loss. The BCA toolkit uses standard values for electrical, potable water, and wastewater service. Next slide, please. Information needed to start a benefit cost analysis. So these four components are part of the project configuration. This is important information to have before starting the benefit cost analysis. So we'll start with property location. What is it? For each project structure, you need either the address or the latitude and longitude coordinates for that structure. Where can you find it? You can find it within the title documents, local building inspector, local tax assessor's office, and you can also use online mapping services such as Google Earth, Maps, etc. Property structure type, that's going to be the description slash classification of the structure, either as residential, non-residential, critical facility, utility, or as a road/bridge. You can find this information through photos of the property, scope of work description, design drawings, as-builts. The hazard type, that's going to be the description of the natural hazard that the project intends to address. This can be riverine flooding, can be coastal flooding, can be hurricane wind, wildfires, etc. And where can you find this information? You can find it from historical accounts of past damages and hazards causing them. This is information you can get from the project manager, engineer, planner, or other representative familiar with the proposed project. Mitigation action type. This describes a specific mitigation project being considered. So within the toolkit, you'll find options such as floodplain and stream restoration, elevation/acquisition, and infrastructure failure. Where can you find this information? It can be included in your scope of work description from project manager, engineer, planner, or other representative familiar with the proposed project. And there also is the benefit cost analysis help menu within the toolkit. It has a very detailed description for each mitigation action type. So we do understand that some projects may be a bit out of the box and it might not be clear which mitigation action type. I think the help menu would be a great place to start to see which would fit best. And if not, if you ever have questions, we'd love to have a discussion about that and find the best route for you to take for your mitigation action type. Next slide, please. Supporting documentation examples. So specifically for acquisition / elevation or floodproofing project, examples of supporting documentation for possible benefits or proof of avoidable damages can include, but is not limited to, cost of previous repairs / damages from flooding, elevation certificate, insurance claims, receipts for work, materials, and volunteer hours associated with repair flood damage, engineer's assessment of damage to building, engineer's mitigation proposal and estimate of reduced flood water elevations in the building, services provided by facility if it is a commercial building, and effects of flood events on business. Next slide, please. For drainage improvement / culvert upgrade projects, examples for documentation may include detour information for road closure in response to flooding, cost of emergency measures taken in response, past project worksheets for public assistance for that location, town pay stubs and timesheets for work related to damages from past flooding, traffic count on road for proposed mitigation project, so the amount of trips taken per day on that road, the official town statement for materials, labors, or equipment used for work related to the damages from past flooding. Next slide, please. For a generator project, examples of supporting documentation may include power outage history at the critical facility, letters from the utility company validating that power outage history, costs of running an emergency shelter for one day, emergency medical services provided by the critical facility, population served by the critical facility, and distance to nearest critical facility in event power was lost. Next slide, please. Part 3, the Benefit Cost Analysis Toolkit version 6.0, the Excel add-in. Next slide, please. So with here, after we reviewed the basic concept, I will now be going over how to access the FEMA Benefit Cost Analysis V6.0. It's just in another Excel add-in. And to evaluate proposed hazard mitigation projects prior to funding, FEMA requires a benefit cost analysis to validate its cost effectiveness. So as I mentioned previously, the project's total benefits divided by its total cost is called the BCR. That's the benefit cost ratio. And we need that to be 1.0 or greater for it to be seen as cost effective in FEMA's eyes. Now, to ensure that the project is cost effective, applicant and sub-applicant must use FEMA approved methodologies and the supplemental guidance for the BCA Toolkit version 6.0. Next slide, please. You can download the BCA Toolkit v6.0 Excel template directly from FEMA's website. The link is provided there. You will need Excel 2013 or later. And if you are having issues with the desktop version, you may use the Excel Online option. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll be able to see what the web page looks like. The box outlined in red, that's going to be the button you click to download the Excel template. Next slide, please. Once you have downloaded that Excel template, go ahead and open it up. Once you are inside Excel, you will need to go into the Insert tab. Next step, please. Next slide, please. And then the next step Once you go into the Insert tab, we'll be clicking the Get Add-ins button, and that will allow you to access the Office add-in store. Next slide, please. Once you're able to see that Office add-ins window, you will go ahead and enter BCA into the search bar. Click that little magnifying glass. The first result will be FEMA Benefit Cost Analysis Calculator. You'll go ahead and click that green add button right next to it. Next slide, please. Once you do that, click that green add-in button. It will ask you if you agree to the license terms and privacy policy. If you do, you go ahead and click continue. Next slide, please. And after clicking continue, you will now see the BCA v6.0 icon appear in your screen under add-ins. There will be a green little text box right next under it saying get started. That means you have successfully added that calculator add-in into your Excel. Next slide, please. Part 4, BCA Toolkit version 6.0, starting the analysis. Next slide, please. The initial steps will be now to go ahead and click that FEMA BCA v6.0 icon. Once you do, there's going to be a little side window that opens right below it. You click on that Open Calculator button in blue, and that will open up a new window. And that's going to be the FEMA Benefit Cost Analysis Calculator. You go in, click the plus Add Project button. That's outlined with that red arrow there. And once you do that, you'll be able to start entering in your project details, name, title, etc. Next slide, please. So within the project configuration, the first few items it will ask you for is to enter in the project title. This input will be the same title as used in the sub application for the project. Right below that is going to be property location. It's important to use the correct project address or the GPS coordinates, the latitude/longitude. Then right below that will be property structure type. It's going to be a drop-down selection for either critical facility buildings, utilities, roads and bridges, residential/non-residential, or other. And then below that is going to be hazard type. It's going to be a drop-down selection for the primary hazard being mitigated, whether that's coastal flooding, riverine flooding, hurricane wind. And then right below that is the mitigation action type. That's going to be a drop-down selection that best relates to the proposed scope, whether it's floodplain stream restoration, elevation acquisition, etc. Next slide, please. Now, the next section you see on your screen right below project configuration will be cost estimation. So we'll ask you for project useful life, costs, annual maintenance, etc. One great resource that I wanted to highlight and outline is that little I button. It's the BCA help button for the toolkit. It's very helpful for looking at standard values accepted by FEMA, and also just for defining any terms used in the toolkit. If anything is a bit unclear, if you click that help button, I'm positive it's going to be there. You're going to get a good definition and a few resources to see where you can find that information. Wherever possible, default values have already been populated in the toolkit for you. If you wanted to enter a custom value, you can switch the toggle button to no. So as you can see outlined in that red box right now, it's yes. If you switch it to no, then it'll allow you to enter in the number of maintenance years just for this specific snippet. But please be sure to always provide a comment and documentation if you do not use the default value provided. Next slide, please. And after you have the project configuration and the cost estimation, it's also going to ask you for the damage and frequency relationship. There's three options. We have model damages, historical damages, or professional expected damages. Now, model damages, this may not be available for all mitigation action types, but for a few, such as roof diaphragm retrofit, you will be able to use this. Now, you can select this option to perform the analysis on the property, regardless of past damage history. The BCA results for the selected hazard will be modeled based on the inputs provided. So if we were doing a roof diaphragm retrofit and we wanted to use model damages, based on the location of the project, the toolkit will determine the wind intervals for that location and the damages that will be modeled based on those intervals. Note, model damages are not available for generators projects, unfortunately. Right below that is historical damages. You can select this option if historic damages slash losses are available and they are dated, so we know what years this all occurred. Sources of documents for damages can include utility power outage report, insurance claims, damage repair records, data from state and local agencies, newspaper citing, and FEMA project worksheets. And then lastly, we have professional expected damages. You can select this option if the scientific data you have would show how much damage would result if a given event were to occur. For this, documentation can include engineering reports, technical studies, etc. There must be documentation provided for all damages used for professional expected. Next slide, please. Damage frequency assessment. So for this section, it's years of analysis conducted. So typically the current calendar year. So if you went into the toolkit today, right now, the year of analysis conducted would say 2022. Right below that year property was built. This is going to be when the asset being mitigated was built. And then right below that, analysis duration. This is auto-calculated from minusing the above inputs. So if the year of analysis conducted minus the year property of built, that's going to be your analysis duration. Next slide, please. Part 5, benefit cost analysis, additional resources. Next slide, please. So here we have gathered a plethora of resources that may be useful to help guide you and aid you in terms of completing your benefit cost analysis. You will be provided all these links within the slides. Next slide, please. Here are some more training materials and resources we have provided. Next slide, please. And then here are some other resources we provided that you can use in terms of creating or using as supporting documentation to validate your occurrence intervals. So these are the NOAA's, ATC, National Weather Service. These are all very helpful for getting that data. Next slide, please. Hazard Mitigation Grant Program Technical Assistance Contact. Now, DISHES has an application development team available and ready to provide technical assistance with application development, assistance with the benefit cost analysis, and assistance to applicants who are not familiar with the FEMA HMGP process. Right below that, we have the email address listed for all 3 disasters. If you have any questions, would like us to take a look at any ideas, we'd be more than happy to work with you. So please reach out. And at this point, I'd like to thank everyone for attending. And at this point, we will go ahead and take on some more questions. Any questions you have available? Thank you.
Thank you, Supreet. This was Brian, the kind of host in the background. We did have one question come in that I want to make sure I get a good answer for. It's related to 4 generators in 4 different locations. This might be useful for everyone to hear how this works logistically. So in the Q&A, you can see, it's one application for projects, but Supreet's indicated it's one BCA analysis. So Supreet, would you mind answering that, just explaining that a little bit more for folks? Supreet, you are unmuted, just so you're aware. Also offer it up to Mark or Pravnor. making sure you can hear me. Probnor got, okay, sorry, just doing a little logistics, folks. Stick with us for just a moment here. Looks like Probnor got muted. Probnor, are you now unmuted?
Yeah, I'm unmuted. So
Okay.
in terms of the BCA analysis, it can be one BCA analysis. You can add the 4 different locations, and we can compute that benefit cost analysis for each separate location, and you can put that on one application.
And Supreet's now unmuted. Anything you want to add to that, Supreet? Okay. Other questions, I see another one here that says, are prior UOC projects or Army Corps of Engineers projects allowed to be shown as prior costs? I'll add that to the group to see if there's an answer. Probnor, any thoughts on that? Mark?
I'm sorry, I cannot see the question. Where is it listed?
Oh, okay. I'll put it in the chat so you can see it. I
Yeah.
apologize. Yeah, if folks don't mind not sending them directly to me privately, that way everyone can see the questions. It's listed there now for you. So the question is, are prior Army Corps of Engineers projects allowed to be shown as prior costs? It feels like something that'd be better to take offline.
Yeah, I
maybe
think
discuss. So that looks like Deb wrote that, or sorry, Stephen did. So Stephen, if you wouldn't mind, I'll provide in the chat here where you can reach out to us. That probably is a pretty nuanced question that we'd want to hear more about before we fully answer. It looks like Supreet's microphone's not working, so we'll kind of rely on Mark. Mark, I haven't heard from you yet. Are you able to speak?
Hi, Brian and team. Do you all hear me?
Yep, sounds good. All right, sounds good. We got two of our BCA specialists here at least able to speak. I have another question that came in directly to me privately. Again, don't mind putting that out to everyone so that the panelists can see it. It says, does local labor count toward the local share? I can answer that one. Yes. So local labor does count towards your required local share of the federal local cost share. It can be an in-kind resource, equipment resource, or cash. So there's a few different options. It does not have to be 100% local share cash. There's another question that came through from Sarah Bollinger. Is there a BCA for planning grant requests? I can also answer that one. BCAs are not required for planning related projects. So that's the good news. It's a little bit of an easier process as far as the number of steps. So be happy to discuss your projects offline too if you'd like to reach out to our email address. Other BCA questions? I'm also happy to unmute somebody if they want to raise their hand and verbally ask the question. If you don't see me acknowledge you, maybe write me a chat or just to say that you want to speak. So we have folks available and happy to answer your questions. I know that we get probably every day at least 5 or 6 that come through our email box, so you're welcome to take your projects to us there. But if you want to talk through something, we have time and would be happy to discuss with you. Just let us know. Just making sure no one has their hand up that I'm missing here. Give it just another minute in case anybody has something they're still typing out. I don't want to cut you off. And again, you're welcome to reach out to us if you'd rather do it more one-on-one or with our team. For those who have or haven't been on these webinars before, looks like we have another question that came in. I'll share about that in a minute. Should we assume that the DR 4480 approval for 90% grant funding will be approved before the submission deadline? If yes, then we can develop budgets assuming a 10% match. That is a great question. I think that is fair to assume, but it is not guaranteed. That's how I'll answer it. We are anticipating that we will get to 90% for 4480, but it's not guaranteed at this moment. We're still working out logistics. That is our intention and our hope. We had another question come in privately to me, so I will just share the question and share back out to folks. When can you get the slides? I will do my best today. I have a list that I get from every webinar of who attends. I will do my best to get you the slides out by the end of the week. And then I have another question that came in. It's again more programmatic, so I'll take it. This is from Frank. Why not merge the FEMA grants portal with state application? That's a great bit of feedback. I think that in the future, we're looking at how to streamline the process. Right now, this is what we're doing, but I think it's a great bit of feedback, and I think we're always working on how to improve our process. So thank you for noting that, Frank. It's a logical option. We'll see what we can do on our end. No guarantees, but I do think that more of it will be moved into online soon. This one is actually much more of a manual option. It's not through FEMA Go, so just to make sure everyone's aware. And Thad just mentioned to everyone that we are moving towards FEMA Go. So that's where in the future we'll be heading to, but for this particular application around these three, we are asking for you to send them to that email that I sent out, and I'll send out again. So other questions? And just in case you missed it in the chats, I'm just reposting. It's also on your screen, but give you as many ways to copy and paste as possible for this. Any other BCA questions? A lot of these have been more programmatic in nature. Still had a couple coming in, so we'll give it another minute here before we wrap it up. So appreciate everyone who's been here. I know this is the third BCA webinar. We're always trying to incorporate things we're hearing or new information to make them better. But if you have feedback, feel free to write to us and let us know. Appreciate everyone's help and being here today. I like Thad's answer. You've got a 90% chance of a 90% cost share approval prior to the deadline. I'd say that's a reasonable estimate. So that's where we're heading, just figuring out the details. That's a great question, Sylvia. If you wanted to submit before June 1st, can you submit two budgets, one for 75-25, one for 90-10? I would suggest, Sylvia, that you submit the budget that aligns with the current NOFO. We can always work out the details afterwards. So if the document still is 75-25, then let's go that route. But just know that, you know, if you get caught in the transition, we'll work with you, and it won't preclude you from having submitted an application. Good question, though. Others about the BCA or about these funding sources in general? Let's give it 30 more seconds in case there's been a few that have come in. You know, while people are thinking about their questions, I just wanted to kind of reemphasize that we are in the technical assistance window. We really appreciate people sending in draft applications, and we will do our best to review them and give you feedback to make them as strong as possible based on how much time we have. So if you haven't gotten started on your BCA, really encourage you after this, or hopefully you did it during, but if not afterwards, download it, test it out, get familiar with it, make sure you have access and things are working. It gets a lot easier once you get access to it. So please do so. We have lots of resources for how to troubleshoot if you're having trouble getting into it. We've been developing a lot of those. I think Supreet's posted that earlier. So I will see if I can snag that as just another place to go if you're stuck or having trouble. I would say 2/3 of our recent conversations have been about the BCA. So hopefully this is helping people. It looks like Deb has raised their hand, so I'm just going to go find Deb really quick. I apologize for the delay. Is it Deborah Flock? I don't see your hand raised, but just want to make sure that's the right person. And I will unmute you, assuming that it is. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Deb. Let us know if you can hear us, and feel free to say something. Deb, are you able to hear us? Oh, it looks like you muted yourself. Did I get the wrong Deb? Is it not Deborah Flock? Oh, I see another Deb. There we are. Okay, I apologize. Hey, Deb, can you hear us? And can you speak to us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, feel free to ask your question.
I noticed that you answered my question earlier about the do one project title for 4 generators in different locations. But in the webinar that was on Tuesday, I believe I understood that you needed one application for each generator, being that they are in different locations with different populations and social, levels and all that sort of thing. So when I do the BCA calculator, it will allow me to print them out separately and send them with each application, or was I incorrect in assuming I need a separate application for each one?
Great question. And I'm going to go ahead just for to have the option to unmute that in case there's anything that he wants to add to my answer. But from what you're describing, if you have the same activity type, you can put them into one application. However, if it's for different communities, different jurisdictions, it might be best to keep them separate. So we can always take that as a one-on-one. We'd be happy to support you, Deb, in that. Maybe you could reach out to the 4480 email and we could just talk through your specific situation, get you good guidance right away. Just if that would be a good option for you, just to make sure you get really clear answer and you can make sure you don't waste any time.
Okay, so then I would have to do a separate BCA for each application.
If you had more than one application, then there would be, yes, there'd be more than one BCA.
Can you hear me, Brian?
Yes, probably.
Yeah, this is
sorry.
So you can do multiple addresses, locations by adding additional mitigation actions to the same project. There's a question right now that the BCA toolkit only asks for one address. How do we deal with multiple locations? You do the analysis for each location as a separate mitigation action. And at the end, there's a total aggregate BCR. If 2 locations are not passing, are not cost effective, you can use the benefits of the remaining. Let's say if you have 4 locations, you can use the benefits from the other remaining 2 locations to get an overall aggregate of more than 1. So you can use multiple locations.
So each of them is its own kind of BCA within one larger BCA that looks at them across all 4 of them. Is that correct, Supreet?
Yes, you get an aggregate benefit cost ratio.
Right. So I think when you're creating a new BCA, there's like the add project. You would create a new add project for each of those 4 locations or however many locations you have, and it would
Correct.
aggregate across all 4 of them when you get back to your kind of your main screen. Good. Deb, would you like to take that one offline and we can definitely make sure we understand your situation fully and give you the best guidance? Would that work for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started the BCA and I have, I realized that the project title was going for one specific location. So I changed the project title because under the project title, I have 3 different projects added, or locations added. But in the, I realized that in the application process, the actual application would have to be separated by location, being that they are in different, unless we want to count Onondaga County as a whole, which it doesn't feed the entire county, so
sure.
Maybe we'll have to talk separately.
Yeah, we would be happy to. So
yeah, the project title in the BCA analysis is going to be the same for all additional mitigation actions. I recommend just stating critical facilities / generators. This way you're not labeling any
Location.
Yeah. location is going to be picked up by the GPS coordinates, but the naming will be the same for all, for in this case for analysis.
Yeah, because it's going to be a generator for different pump stations in our utility.
Yeah, so you can have an overall name of the project rather than.
Sorry to interrupt. Is your question is because as it relates to the SVI indicator for each of the locations of the pump? Is that it, or?
That's only part of it.
Okay.
I mean, I thought that we have to put a separate application for each generator that we're looking for.
Yeah, no, so I'll,
And then you
back it off for
can,
the team, but absolutely you can put all the generators on a single application.
okay. So then the BCA would have, once you download it into a document or whatever, then you add that to your application for that generator location. Is that is that how it goes?
Yeah, I'll defer to the BCA SMEs on how you enter each generator into the BCA toolkit. Rob, or Super, if you guys want to go over that, but
Well, yeah, I have already done that. What I'm just,
okay.
how do I include it into my application, the total application?
For the total application, so like for the home screen, when you open up that BCA calculator,
Right.
right where we were showing the plus add project, like at the top of
Yeah. Right.
that menu, right to the right of it, it says print report. So you can, once you click print report, it's gonna show you a PDF of the entire calculator, all inputs, any comments you put, it'll all be displayed in that PDF. And you
Right.
can just Microsoft print the PDF, save that, and send that over. And if you want to provide the Excel file that you used, you could save that and send that over too. And then we could take a look at it and look at all the
Okay.
context with the documentation and make sure we optimize it and see what's the best way to get it cost effective.
Okay. All right. I believe that's answered all my questions there.
Good. Thanks, Deb. Interestingly enough, Deborah Flock, you had your hand raised. I see it's not raised anymore. I didn't know if you got your question answered, but if you would like to talk, please let us know, and we're here to answer questions to the best of our ability or take them offline. So just let me know. And Deb, I'm going to go ahead and mute you, so just so you know. Okay. Let's see here. Anybody else before we call it? Okay. Unmute's not working. I didn't actually try to unmute you yet, but I can try unmuting if you would like to. But it looks like you have no questions, so we can leave it. No problem. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all for your time. Thanks for sticking around. Please use this as a resource. We are in the technical assistance window here until June 1st and have a team stood up to help people navigate this process. It is somewhat complicated often for your first time, and we're here to help and do our best to help you navigate through it all. Thank you, Prabnor, for your presentation. Thank you, Thad, for the intro. And if you have questions both about BCAs or about the application generally, don't hesitate to reach out. We have those emails kind of sprinkled throughout the chat as well as here on the screen. And if you're not sure who to send it to, I manage the 4480 box. Well, I'll make sure it gets to the right person. You can send it there. And looks like we had one other thing come through at the very end from Supreet. If anyone wants to add another structure or mitigation action to your project, click on the Add Mitigation Action button on the project summary screen. This will open up the project configuration screen for a new structure within that project. So that's the way to kind of add more than one if you have different addresses for a project. Thank you, Supreet. Again, if you want to take those specific questions to us, we will set up calls and help you maybe with some screen shares, etc. We've been doing that a lot with folks all over the state. All right, have a great day, and thanks for being here today.